Hi, everybody. We are going to get started here in just a minute. I want to give people just another minute to sign in. All right, I think we'll get started. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Greg Jutras. I work for a company called HVAC Solutions. What that means is basically, in a nutshell, I work for TEC out of Chicago. The phone number here is my cell phone number, so feel free to call me with any questions. If you would like more information or sizing guides or a copy of this presentation, please email me and I'd be more than happy to get anything out to you that I can. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Honeywell generators, and basically the way I work is real informal. So I know we're not really asking questions here, but if you type a question into the chat box, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I'll try to take a look at them as we go through here, but if I miss it or don't get to it, I will certainly answer the question before we're done. All right, so when we start looking at Honeywell generators, this is a Generac made product labeled Honeywell. So with all of the different brands that Generac could have picked, they chose Honeywell. Why did they do that? Well, first, it's because 92% of the consumers out there know of the Honeywell brand. And also, in this case, we're working with HVAC contractors, and I think we'd be hard-pressed to find a contractor that did not know what the Honeywell brand is. We think of Honeywell, mainly in thermostats or controls or that kind of thing. But the reality is Honeywell has the potential not only to be in every home, but in multiple rooms. They do a lot with security. They do a lot with portables. They do a lot with door chimes. I mean, there's a million products that this company manufactures, and generators fits well with what we're trying to do. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on who buys generators, but as you can see, we're not looking for the first-time home buyer. Generally speaking, I'm going to say most generators are sold to people who are 45 and older. Income levels. Now, this one actually shocked me a little bit because I felt that people who were going to purchase a standby generator were way off to the, I'll say, the right of your screen. Making $200,000 a year, $250,000 a year, but that's not the case. The reality is most people buying generators are in that $50,000 to $100,000 a year. I would say the only caveat to that is that there's a lot more people making that kind of money. So by default, they buy more generators, if that makes sense. Now, who could use a generator? I'm going to say it's self-explanatory. Households could use generators. Businesses could use generators. You know, it'd be hard to walk down the street without seeing a place that could use one. But the point I wanted to make is that homeowners buy generators so that their basements don't flood, so that their food doesn't go bad. Business owners buy generators so that they can keep the cash register ringing. So very different reasons why they buy generators. If I talk quickly about Honeywell's lineup, at the top, you've got what they consider a portable generator. This is what I call the two-wheel dolly type. You know, this is good for running a sump pump, a refrigerator, you know, a few minor things within a house. The next one, that little handheld generator in the middle, that is what's called an inverter generator. This guy is good for tailgating, camping. You know, this thing's going to run a blender or something like that. I bring this guy up because with that inverter name, a lot of people associate it with cleaner power. And while it is a cleaner power, some people will ask you for a standby generator that's an inverter. So they kind of confuse the two. So the reality is there's not a standby generator that is an inverter. What I would tell them is that, you know, the power has gotten cleaner over the years. You know, this third generation of generators is much cleaner than the first generation. So just be aware. Some people will ask for an inverter when talking about a standby and not realize that the two are not really interchangeable. So mainly what this presentation is going to focus on is the home standby generators, and we do also offer commercial standby generators up to the 150 kW. Honeywell's product offering. In the air-cooled models, these are in the 10, 15, and 20 kW styles. The three sizes make it extremely, I'm going to say, a lot simpler to size. And if you look at the bottom, when we compare this to the Generac offering, they have a lot more sizes in the air-cooled. You know, they have an 8 kW, a 14 kW, a 20 kW. So where we have three sizes, they have five. Some people might see that as a disadvantage, but it's less stock, and we've also, how do I say, done the pricing that our 15 is actually a 17 and is going to be priced closer to a 14. So you get a little bit bigger generator or a little bit bigger bang for your buck. We stock all three of the air-cooled sizes. Liquid-cooled, it goes from 25 kW and, like I said, up to 150 kW. Those are available in both single-phase, three-phase, with different voltage options. Currently, I stock a 25 kW liquid-cooled and a 45 kW liquid-cooled. All right, so we talked about this being a Generac-made machine with the Honeywell label. So what makes this thing different? It really comes down to these 6 features or feature set. The first one is this load shed, which means we're trying to sell a whole house option versus a handful of circuits. The warranty on this machine is going to be a little bit better than the Generac. It also comes with a remote monitor right out of the box. The Honeywell units come with the base fascia, which we'll talk about. All of our units are aluminum, and they all come with the GFCI rated outlet. So those 6 features are really what I'll say sets this apart from any standard Generac machine. The digital controls. Now, this is what I call the brains of the unit. This is on the outdoor unit, and this guy really has what I'm going to call two different features, or 2 different things it should be doing. The first is it communicates with the transfer switch. It's constantly looking at frequency to know what that transfer switch is doing. It also is going to communicate with the remote control. So you can do most of what you can do at this outdoor circuit board inside the home. I bring this up because if you were to take an old unit and try to make it into a newer load shedding machine, this is basically the part you have to install. And while it can be done, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it is possible. Transfer switches. These come in some different flavors. The first one is service rated. We stock 100, 200, and 400 amp service rated transfer switch. The service rated basically means it has a circuit breaker inside of the transfer switch. These are all NEMA 3 rated, and that means they can be mounted outside. The other switches, we do offer a 16 circuit easy switch, which would not be service rated. And then commercial switches come in a lot of different types, depending on the voltage in the phase. And any 3-phase transfer switch cannot be service rated. All right, so for those of you who have installed generators in the past, this may look familiar. This is what I'm going to call the old way of doing it. We would run wires from the meter to the customer's circuit breaker panel in the basement, and then run wires to, I'll call it a 16 circuit switch. This is the easy switch I was just talking about. When power goes out, what you get is whatever is on those 16 circuit switches. Now, if I was to ask you what is easy about wiring this setup up, basically it comes down to where do you turn off power? Looking at this picture, I can tell you, you turn off power right at the customer's circuit breaker. Boom, flip a switch, and then you can wire in those 16 circuits. And oh, by the way, it's pre-wired, so you don't have to run any wire or conduit. Makes it real nice, easy. So how are we doing it? Because it's very different. Instead of mounting the transfer switch after the circuit breaker box, we're putting it before. So we're going from the meter to or through the transfer switch to the entire circuit breaker panel. So instead of getting power to the 16 circuits, emergency backup power from the generator, we're backing up the entire house. So it's a very different idea. Now, what would be difficult about this installation? Again, it gets back to power, because we're not flipping a switch here to turn off power. Somebody has to physically pull that meter to drop power out to the entire house to be able to wire this in. This transfer switch is also not pre-wired, so all the wires would have to be running conduit or I'll say field installed might be the best way. Now, if I go back here, we said this guy's a lot easier, but what is difficult about this installation? I'll tell you, even though it's pre-wired for 16 circuits, you still have 32 individual wires you have to run to each of the circuits you want power to. So that's not always the easiest thing. Plus, those whips are sometimes 30 feet long. So if you have excess, sometimes you have to trim them anyway, or try wrapping them around or something like that. So in this way, we don't have 16 wires to mess with, or I'm sorry, 32 wires for 16 circuits. We're dealing with main power from the meter and running that through the switch to the circuit breaker panel. So we're dealing with a lot less amount of wires, but we're dealing with bigger wires. And hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And I got a question here. Okay. There's a question about does the Honeywell competitors come with the aluminum shell and the remote right out of the box? And the answer is no. If you were to buy a Generac labeled machine, 9 times out of 10, you have to order or pay more for the aluminum encasing. Most of those are steel. The exception would be a 20 kW, and at that point they start going to, I'll say, standard with the aluminum. And on the Generac, the remote is always going to be an option. So a Generac dealer would have to offer that as an option and pay more for it. All right, so we talked about doing the whole house versus a handful of circuits. And this is where I'll say the brains of the transfer switch lies. This circuit board is inside of the transfer switch. So if I was to run through a quick sequence of operation, we lose utility power. The generator at the top left turns on, sends power through the transfer switch, and the first thing that happens is we turn on what I'm going to call the 115 volt circuits in the customer's circuit breaker box. So what are the 115 volt circuits in a house? Well, you get lights, you get outlets, you get the fridge, you get the sump pump, you get the garage. Probably a few more that I can't think of at the moment. So you get all of the, what I'm going to call emergency things or things people need right away. Then power goes to this circuit board within the transfer switch. And if you see here on the left, it says AC1. Now, if your thermostat is calling on AC1 and the generator has enough power to turn that on, it will do so. Then it would go over to L1. And L1 would be a 240 volt circuit shown here as an electric hot water heater. So if there's enough power, it would turn that on. From there, if there was a second air conditioner, it would go through that same process. And we'll just say air conditioner 2 is not running, so it immediately goes to L2. At that point, let's say that L2 is a well pump. The well pump would turn on provided there's enough power at the generator. Then it would go to L3, and we'll say maybe that's a electric range or electric dryer sometimes are on there. You know, if that thing's on and it's calling, if the generator has enough juice, it would turn on. Now let's say, you know, the kids get home and they're watching big screen TV, playing Xbox, every light in the house is on, and boom, all of a sudden we don't have enough power. It's going to shut this stuff down, so it lets it go. Then it's going to come back on and slowly say, can I do AC1? Can I do L1? And right down the line. So the priority is AC1 and L1. Second priority would be AC2 and L2. Then it would be L3 and L4. Now you can play with these a little bit in I'll call them strange circumstances, where maybe that well pump needs to be the first priority. So we leave that on L1. And let's just say that there's only one air conditioner, not two. We can then put that air conditioner on AC2 instead of AC1. So if you look at what we did, immediately you would get the 115s. Then it would go to AC1 and L1. We don't have an air conditioner there, so it would only be L1, and we'd kick on that well pump. Then it would go to AC2 because that's less of a priority for this homeowner than the well pump. I'm hoping everybody's with me. One other thing we can do, if for some reason they said, you know, I don't want that well pump to ever shed. I always want my well pump. Okay, we leave it on the 115 side. We don't shed it. What's the penalty? At that point, we have to size the generator for whatever we're leaving on the customer circuit breaker panel. If we pull it off, we can go with a smaller generator, because the reality is not every light in the house is always going to be on. We're not always going to have the you know, hot water heater with the dryer, with the furnace, with everything running at the same time. It's just very unlikely. So if I was to run through this one more time, and only because this is a very important part of this presentation. If we lose power, utility goes out, the generator kicks on, the first thing we do, we send power to the 115s in the customer circuit breaker panel. Once we have power there, we look at AC1 and L1. And if we can start them, we do. Then it goes to AC2 and L2. Then on to L3 and L4. This is the DLM, the Digital Load Management Control. All this is a 50 amp contactor in a nice little NEMA 3 box. So I like to call it the expensive contactor. This guy's, I'm going to say about 35 bucks, something like that. And I'm going to go back here because we use this DLM on the L side. So on any 240 volt load that we're going to shed, we have to have a 50 amp contactor between the circuit breaker and L1, L2, L3, or L4. Now, what's nice, on the AC1 or AC2 side, those are 24 volt connections. So what we're able to do is just drop out the Y1. So we're just running control wiring over to AC1 and AC2. And I will say rarely do I see where we need to shed 4 240-volt loads outside of the air conditioners. All right, so that's the DLM. You can use up to 4. This is our what I'm going to call quick and dirty sizing guide. This isn't extremely technical, but I like to use this with technicians if they are out in the field and somebody's asking about a generator. How this breaks down, across the top, we see where it says 10 kW, 15 kW, or 20 kW. If you go down, a 10 kW will start a 3-ton air conditioner. And it'll run the house as long as it's a decent-sized house, within reason. 15 kW will run a 4-ton. And the 20 kW will run a 5-ton. Now, the question I always get here is, it says 3-ton air conditioner, and then it's got 2 in parentheses. Yeah, the quick answer is yes, you could absolutely hook up 2 3-ton air conditioners, but they will never run at the same time. So if I go back, we have connections for an AC1 and an AC2, but if you're hooking up 2 3-tons, they're not going to both run at the same time. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I would never count on that with a homeowner. The idea is hopefully it's set up to where the bedrooms are maybe upstairs, and that's one unit, and then the downstairs or living area is on another unit, so they can just via the thermostat turn on which one they want during that time. Otherwise, it will shed. If you were to go onto Generac's website, somewhere in there you could find a generator sizing tool. I bring this up because sometimes homeowners will use this because it's really more of a homeowner designed sizing guide. How many refrigerators, how many fans, all that good stuff. And they'll say, I did this sizing guide, or better yet, Generac told me I only need an 8 kW. And you're going to come in and say, well, you got that 4-ton unit out there. I don't think an 8 kW is going to help you out. So I just want you to be aware that homeowners will use this and sometimes tell you what size they're looking for. Industrial sizing, if anybody has a big project or a hospital or something like that, we do have software available, or more than happy to help you size that. All right, maintenance kits. We stock a full line of maintenance kits. I'm going to say right now we have them for the Honeywell line in total, and we are currently bringing in maintenance kits for the older Carrier Bryant, Generac units, that kind of thing. I'm going to say maintenance kits, there's not a whole lot to them. There's an air filter, some spark plugs. You're going to want to do these every 2 years or every 200 hours. I like to tell people to go out there every year, because even if you get just the slightest bit of runtime, you're going to want to change these out, because these actually use oil. Oh, and the oil is the other thing I forgot to tell you. You're going to want to bring 2 quarts of oil. I like the 5W30 synthetic, but it's really your call. And very shortly, we will be stocking maintenance kits with oil, if that helps anybody out. I'm not sure. Cold weather kits. I get questions on these sometimes, and basically my response is in Chicago, we don't sell them very often. I don't think these need to be installed on every unit or even most units. I like to use these when the situation is critical. And what I mean by critical is, somebody's on life support, or it's an animal hospital, or, something that no matter what happens, this unit has to start. And at that point, they don't mind paying for a cold weather kit because they are not cheap. This is Honeywell's website. It's honeywellgenerators.com. And what I want you to notice is two things. First, if you look at the tab, I'm going to say on the top right side where it says Service and Support, if you go to the website and you click on that link, it will take you to a spot where you can type in a model number. From there, you can get specifications, you can get literature, service manuals, you get anything that you need for that unit. So if you needed it on a weekend or something like that, you could print it out. The other thing is the dealer locator tab. In there, if a homeowner got onto the site and was looking for a dealer, we could have your name pop up. All right, so what is a dealer? In Honeywell's world, it breaks down into two different animals. The first one is a sales dealer. Basically, that means a person can buy a unit, they can install the unit, but that's really about it. They can also be on the website as a sales dealer. The service dealer does all that and then goes a step further to where they can not only do service, but they can do warranty work for not only Honeywell generators, but all the different brands that Generac manufactures. So that would be Generac, Honeywell, Carrier, Bryant, Eaton, Siemens, Watchdog, all these different brands that they create out there. A Honeywell servicing dealer would be able to do warranty work for. So how do you become a sales dealer? Well, this one's actually pretty easy. You buy a generator, meaning one. You fill out a form, and then you agree to watch their online sales training. Fill out a form, and you get put on the website. A servicing dealer, a little bit different. Basically, one person has to complete, and when I say complete, they have to be successful at passing a test from the 2-day air-cooled class. After somebody has passed the class, there's a parts kit that Generac wants you to buy. So pass the class, buy the parts kit, fill out the paperwork, and then at that point you can be a sales and servicing dealer. And again, that allows you to not only buy the unit, install the unit, but then provide warranty service work for the generators. All right, on the install, I get asked the question all the time, what is the number one issue when installing generators? And so I called up Generac and I said, when your people are on the phone, what is the number one issue that you run into? And hands down, they all said the gas. Now, from the gas, it broke down into a handful of different issues, but generally speaking, the gas line was too small. So if anybody has issues sizing these things or questions, please call me. I mean, I could tell you some war stories where, I've seen a half-inch gas line after the furnace piped out to the generator, and they couldn't figure out why it didn't work. A lot of times the meter's not big enough. I would say, generally speaking, if you're putting in a 15 kW or a 20 kW, you're definitely going to have to look at the meter. And then on a 10 kW, it's a flip of the coin. Say half the time you need a new meter, and sometimes you can squeak by. It's going to depend on the location where it's at. Some other install things to consider. These units do not come with batteries. So I've had a handful of times where guys get out there and they're like, where's the battery? Like, doesn't come with. We're looking at stocking these batteries. For anybody that wants one, they're called a 26R. It's a deep cycle battery. There's really not much to it, other than you want to make sure it's the right size, because they give you about a millimeter to fit that thing in there. And like I said, we're thinking about stocking these. I'm going back and forth because no matter what I do, it seems like I'm going to be it seems like I'm going to be a little bit more than Walmart, probably in that $10 range. Control wires. Now, control wires in a generator usually means 10 gauge. Control wires in a generator do not mean thermostat wire, because I've been on that call too. Also, when you're servicing, or I guess what I'll say is, when you're selling the install, one of the nice things to talk about is the service and maintenance, because I find homeowners all the time who buy a unit and then the guy that installed it will not maintain it, let alone service it. So we're finding that there's good money to be made, at least on the maintenance, if not the service side of these generators. One of the other issues we've seen is the transfer switch is the wrong size. So it doesn't sound like a big deal, but I've had situations where a guy looks at a generator, and let's just say it's a 20 kW, or you know what, better yet, we'll say 15 kW. And this thing's putting off, I'll take a stab, and we'll say 80 amps. So the guy puts in a 100 amp transfer switch. So 15 kW, 100 amp transfer switch. Problem is, the house is 200 amps. And if you can remember back to our picture, the main goes through the transfer switch. So while everything worked fine in that case, what we essentially did was take the entire house from 200 amps down to 100 amps. And why it didn't break the breaker, I couldn't tell you, but it happens where you can undersize the transfer switch or even oversize it. But it should be the right size, and it should be sized for the power going into the house, not what the generator is putting out. Standby versus portable. I bring this up because people sometimes get bogged down with, well, how are you going to compete with the portable guy at Ace Hardware or whatnot? I said, well, you really don't have to compete with them. We actually like those people, because half of the people who buy a portable unit end up buying a standby unit. Why? Because they get sick of having to put gas in it. And when do you have to put gas in it? When it's out, all raining and nasty out. They have to run cords all over the house. And carbon monoxide, it's always an issue because people don't want to go out in the rain, so they put it in the garage, that kind of thing. Backup sump pumps. I threw this in here because we've had some great success with guys that do plumbing and offer backup sump pumps. Why? Because people are already worried about their basement flooding. They're worried about power going out. So the sell is, well, you're going to spend $2,500 anyway on this backup sump pump. You're going to spend $5,000 anyway on this backup sump pump. So why not upgrade and get your lights, your freezer, your entire house for not that much more? So we've had good luck doing that. Noise, I'm going to say 60 decibels, generally speaking. These ratings are always weird because they're kind of far away, 23 feet, and they're in an open field, which really isn't the Chicago home or suburbs for that matter. One nice thing about these units is that they run at 40% power during the exercise mode. So they're not running full-blown where it's going to be a lot louder. When they do run, they run for 12 minutes one time a week. And the time and date is adjustable. You can do it when you want that thing to come on. Sunday at midnight is probably not the best time. All right. So talk about, again, what makes this unit a little bit different. The first thing is the remote. You can do a lot of stuff with it, but ultimately the value here is, when do you want to know that there's a problem with your generator, if there is a problem? Yeah, you want to know before the power goes out, and that's what this allows you to do. I'm going to say that this control is kind of ugly, so it's not something you want, on the living room wall, but maybe on the garage or on a counter somewhere, something like that. But this will tell you if there is any issues with the generator, and you'll find out well before there's a power outage. The base fascia. I threw in two units here. The first one is an air-cooled unit, and the second one is a liquid-cooled. But it was really the only picture I had that showed what the base fascia looks like. It's really that little skirt at the bottom of the unit. It kind of finishes off I call the unit to the ground, but it covers up those forklift holes, and it does a lot better job of keeping the mice out, or rodents. Here's the aluminum cabinet. Hard to tell what it is, but the reality is these units last a long time, and they're usually where somebody's going to see them, next to the patio or the grill, somewhere between the air conditioner. So they're out in the backyard where people are going to see it. And if you have a steel one, or if you ever see the steel ones, they do tend to rust. And nobody wants a rusty box out in the backyard. Warranty. Out of the box, the Honeywell unit comes with 5-year parts and 2 years labor. What you're going to run up against is the 3-year parts and 2 years labor. All of the Honeywell units come with a GFCI outlet on the outdoor unit. I like to call this the beer plug. Help your neighbor out. It's going to give you a case of beer, that kind of thing. We've seen these where, not only can the guy run a refrigerator, or maybe he needs a second sump pump outside or something. It really helps. The smaller Generac units are not going to have an outlet at all. And when you get into the bigger ones, it's not going to be GFCI rated. So I know it's not a big deal talking about a $15 plug, but when are you trying to plug stuff into this thing? You know, again, when it's all raining and snowing and storming outside. So GFCI makes sense. So you take those features into account, and then you throw on top of it the load shed, where we're doing the whole house and we're not giving the consumer just 16 circuits or just 10 circuits or maybe even 20 circuits, whatever it is. So the idea is we're saying you get the entire house, and then you get your air conditioner and some of your larger 240-volt loads when the generator can do it. It's a lot easier conversation than saying, do you really need this hallway? Do you really need that bathroom? Here, you get the whole house, and it will do more when it can. The Honeywell unit is going to cost more than the Generac right out of the box. And if we go 10K to 10 kW, I'm going to say we're going to be probably $400 high all day. The difference would be the Generac is going to come with a 16 circuit switch. So that's all they get. 16 circuits to choose which ones they want to come out. With ours, you would be getting the load shed, which would do the entire house. The Generac unit would be steel. Ours would be aluminum. You would get 5-year parts versus 3-year parts. Ours would come with the remote. They don't have a remote. They wouldn't even have an outlet. We would have a GFCI outlet, and then we would have the base fascia. So I realize it's $400 more out of the box, and it's probably, I'm going to say this, it's going to cost more to install because you're dealing with bigger wires, because you have to mess with the meter. But are these features, can you justify being $1,000 higher? Can you justify being $1,500 higher than the Generac guy? I'm not sure. That's a question for you guys to answer. But what we were trying to do here was give you a product where you could justify being $1,500 higher or whatever it is, because you're able to back it up with a handful of features. And really the idea was to get you out of that price war that we were seeing all day with the Carrier product, because it was the same exact Generac unit, and all it came down to was price all day, in and out. And we have a hard time competing with some of those guys. When I talk about parts, this one's, I'll say simple. We are a parts distribution center for Chicago. We have a ton of stock, and we stock parts for not only Honeywell, but for Generac, Eaton's, Siemens, across the board. We have a ton of parts. And I'm right at about 45 minutes. I really appreciate your time. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, or, like I said, want a copy of this PowerPoint or any sizing guides. Anything I can do, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much.